Welcome to the Quality Conversation brought to you by Resume Wallet. This show is all about discussing what quality means in the talent acquisition ecosystem. I'm your host, Serge Boudreau, and today I'm joined by Anne Diamantopoulos, who is the Manager of Talent Acquisition at Absorb Software. Anne, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's really great to be here, Serge. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Well, tell me a little bit about Anne and your journey into talent acquisition.
Yeah, you bet. Well, we're going to have to take it back a little bit here.
A little bit, right?
I started in the early 2000s recruiting here in Calgary for a boutique oil and gas executive search firm. Okay. So mainly filling engineering, geoscience, and finance roles. I did that for a few years, but I've really evolved and moved through a variety of different industries, not-for-profit, recruiting for healthcare, even the public sector, so for government. So just about every type of role you can think of, from IT to social workers to accounting. And then 3 years ago, I pivoted into tech and came to Absorb, and I think it's probably the best move I've ever made in my career so far.
Government to tech, that's a big shift. How has that transition been?
Well, massive. It couldn't be more different. I went from an organization of 80,000 employees coming to Absorb, and at the time I joined, we were a little under 300 people, actually, probably closer to 250. We're up upwards of 550 employees globally now. It's been amazing because it's being part of an organization where that you're not just a number. What you do can really impact. So you come up with the ideas, and they'll say, "Okay, right, now go make it happen."
Tell me a little bit about Absorb. What type of software is it? And I'm curious also, what roles do you recruit for?
Yeah. So Absorb's flagship product is a learning management system, an LMS. I think most organizations have probably used an LMS at one point in their career. We often think of it as that tool we use to get through that mandatory IT or cybersecurity training courses. Yeah. And often that can be pretty boring, but I think that's really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what an LMS can actually do. There's no limit to the amount of training and courses that can be delivered to employees. And so what are we filling? Well, there's a lot of roles, actually. Typically, it's those go-to-market positions, so sales marketing roles, customer success, operations, so that's accounting and finance, IT, HR, product and engineering roles for R&D teams, just a wide variety.
So you mentioned quite a diversity of roles, and what we're seeing in the talent acquisition landscape right now, some roles are getting too many candidates and some roles are just not getting enough, or at least qualified candidates. Are you seeing the difference between all the types of roles that you're recruiting for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does vary depending on the type of role. Some of our niche technical roles, certainly we don't see as high of candidate flow that we like, and that requires a little bit more work on our time, or on our part rather. But the market overall, I think, is being softer for candidates. We've tried to continue to work as a TA team to ensure that we're really bringing in the best talent out there by building out pipelines and really focusing on the candidate persona that we're looking for, the candidate profiles that we're looking for, and as we build out those relationships. But yes, to answer your question, I mean, there has been a tremendous high volume of candidates, and I think the market has been soft, and we've seen a lot of layoffs in the tech and SaaS space in the last 12 to 18 months. And we've had the ability to really hone in on some of that amazing talent that's out there that's either actively looking or are very aware of the need to look ahead for their next move. And that's beyond major players like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Meta. There's countless other smaller organizations that have been impacted. So I think it's a real opportunity for us to go after targeting that best talent that's out there.
So obviously you're seeing a little bit larger influx of candidate that you've seen in the past, but are you still struggling to find those qualified candidates? The biggest complaint I'm getting is I'm getting tons of applicants, but very few are actually qualified or of quality for what I'm looking for. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where we, in this last year, really had to hone in our efforts at looking at that top quality and knowing that we're going to have to go out and find the talent. They will apply. If you build it, they'll come. But we really have to have that continuous outreach again, and building the relationships and again, understanding that sometimes we have to play the long game. It can take 6 to 12 to 18 months of continually connecting, kind of have that drip campaign sort of approach to things to finally land a candidate when the timing is right for them.
Talent acquisition can lose credibility with its hiring managers if you're not bringing what they deem as qualified or quality candidates. What's your process internally? How do you make sure that the candidates that you're bringing forward to the next steps are of that quality? Is there assessment, screening? Like what does that process look like?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into quality. And I think if we back it up a little bit and think about who we are as an employer and what is our employer brand, I think that's a really big, important part of our success. In the last year, we really tried to partner with our brand, our marketing team for brand and communication to try and expand our own brand visibility on social and LinkedIn. And I think that's been a really big part of our success in promoting it, creating better awareness around our open roles. And we know that, TA can't do that alone. It's a shared opportunity, and we're really trying to turn all employees into brand evangelists, especially our hiring managers as well. So I think that's the foundational side of things. The goal for quality, I mean, that's a whole other conversation as well. So we can get into that.
You hit on something interesting because there's always been a challenge of marketing working with talent acquisition because the priorities on B2B or consumer sales usually take precedent. Have you had those challenges? Like, how does your relationship with marketing work?
Obviously in B2B SaaS, we're selling a product, and the product offering is what comes first. But I think there's a real natural segue and tie into what we do into promoting the overall, product and organization. So finding a way to kind of work together and to complement each other in terms of getting good visibility on our postings, it just increases our overall brand profiling. So it's not just our employer brand profile.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things that the consumer and employer brand are becoming closely aligned, and it makes a lot of sense, right? Because if your strategy and how you're recruiting candidates works very well and people have good impressions of your brand, it's going to translate into your consumer or B2B brands. But I want to go into something that you mentioned. You talked about sometimes you have to play the long game. It takes a little while to get those candidates. You have to engage with them for maybe several years, several months. But how do you balance that? Because when you're looking to hire, they're like, we need someone yesterday. How do you balance the need for speed, but also quality and playing the long-term game with those really A-plus candidates?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, I guess, Serge. The speed, cost, quality trifecta, those are the three pillars of recruitment. And we know at Absorb, based on our time to fill data, that we're typically landing anywhere from about 35 to 50 days, give or take, to fill most of our roles across our go-to-market position, customer success, operations, and engineering. But we also are relying on referrals, quality referrals. And that's a big part of our success because great people know great people. Our pipeline of candidates and direct applicants, that's important, but obviously continuous direct sourcing to try and just build that momentum and have that good pool of quality candidates. So the mistake that we would make is to be complacent because it's more of an employer market right now. Yeah. And I think thinking back to my early days, again, working for a retainer-based exec search firm, if we rushed to fill a role with a less than top quality candidate, the likelihood would be that I would be replacing them within 6 months, and it only for myself. So I was always trying to find all the reasons why that placement wouldn't succeed and address those issues before an offer was ever extended. I think our team hires with an eye on the future and what that candidate maybe will develop into and evolve to in their career pathway at Absorb, so that what will be the next role and the role after that, while focusing on, retaining and upskilling how to fill those future roles. But I think something that we've done really well as an organization is that we've tried to be really intentional and responsible about our hiring forecast and then seeing what it yields. So we're not just scaling for the sake of scaling because we've seen 20 to 25% growth year over year. Because there are so many things that factor into this. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty globally, right? There's just so many economic fluctuations. And AI and automation is impacting the way we work. There's vulnerability in the labor market. DE&I is totally evolving. There's expectations there that are changing. And then, of course, the generational workforce gap between Gen Zs and boomers. There's just so many different things that we're kind of juggling when we're focused on that quality ideal.
Couple things that I want to dive into further. So you mentioned referral. I'm curious, first of all, how do you handle referrals internally? Do you have a particular program? Are they paid? How successful has it been?
Good question. Yeah. Like I say, good people know good people. When we want, to really spread the word about our open roles, we've tried to use a few different channels. We definitely do have a referral bonus program. So for those folks that do refer in someone who is successful and stays enrolled for, the required amount of time that you would receive a payout as well, which is awesome. But we do try to promote our roles internally through our team's channels. We have a talent pipeline, sort of a talent hub, as we call it, where we have a chance to promote those roles we want to get some extra visibility on, and or that we're finding that are just that much more niche, and we just need another set of eyes so that people can start talking about it. And then, of course, LinkedIn. I mean, we really actively ask our employees to, jump on LinkedIn, share the word, share and like, get that engagement going, better visibility on our postings, and they may know somebody who could be a great fit for our team. So we've seen a lot of success there. And I think upwards of maybe even 25 to 30% of our hires last year came through referrals.
Very interesting because, I've always found a referral, especially in tech, as probably my main hiring source, but it's one hiring source. And there's obviously a ton different job board sourcing that you're leveraging. Do you measure the quality of those sources? So say you've hired 20 people on referrals, 30 on a job board. Do you keep track of them later to see, okay, this was our number one source of hire, also our number one source of quality? And it's okay if you don't, not a lot do, but I'm just curious, how do you look at that?
That is a great question, Serge. We don't get as granular as to see as I call it, the retention rate based on source. Obviously, our referrals are usually pretty strong. We do try to take a look, and it's something we're very focused on for this year is that first year retention rate. And we have some targets around that. And you could say, well, why is TA, taking ownership of that first year retention, or how many people are churning in that first year? But I think we set the tone and lay the foundation for the success of that candidate and have a real big part to play in that. So I do hear some folks saying, well, it's our job to get them through the door. And then what happens after that, it's up to the subject matter expert, the hiring manager, to take it and go. But I don't know if I entirely agree with that. I think we have such a huge part to play with ensuring that we are bringing in the absolute best talent on the front end. That is my team's role. That's why we are here, so that we are not putting anybody in front of that hiring manager that we don't feel very strongly about. And if we get that feeling that there's something there that they're just probably not going to align with the culture, or we just don't know that the stickiness is going to be there, then it's our job to identify that on the front end as best we can.
It is a big argument in talent acquisition, and I think it's pretty much split 50-50 between practitioners that, no, it's the hiring manager, or we have a say into it. We do have some responsibility. At one particular point, we have to let go. I think 1 year is like the natural transition point. The other thing you mentioned earlier on was your workforce planning.
Uh-huh.
And I know it's shifting dramatically based on what's going on in the economy and the labor market. And we're a very fluid world right now. But normally, how do you look at workforce planning as far as what roles you're going to recruit? And does it usually align to what you're thinking at the start of the year?
More or less, yeah. My team works very closely with finance. Obviously, we have the forecast is set for the fiscal year. The board approves it. And that's sort of our marching orders. And we use that as our roadmap. But, there's always going to be backfills. That's the reality of recruitment. That's what keeps us in business. And, there are new unbudgeted roles that come up. Again, I think, being very, very intentional about what we are filling, though, and having those conversations. And that goes to, each business unit really has to take a look at what their needs are. And again, ask, can this work be moved around? Do we really need to fill that right now? And just having that real eye to being accountable and responsible to that budget and ensuring we're making really effective hiring decisions. So that we can feel confident that role is not going to be put on hold or postponed or canceled or anything like that because there's been a change of mind.
Oh, it's a bad candidate experience when you're going through a process to be like, we actually pulled that role. So if you could avoid, I think we'd all agree that avoiding it is the best case, and workforce planning is a critical piece of that. Jumping at something else, I'm just curious what I'm hearing, and I'm seeing the data personally, is we're seeing two types of AI assisted, and some are pure AI applications through tools that we call like lazy apply. Basically, a candidate can apply to 500 jobs within hours. I guess it depends on the tool you're leveraging. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing signs of what I call apply bots coming through the system that you're like, I'm not sure if they even know they applied for this role?
Yeah, well, I mentioned we have seen an incredibly high volume of applicants, and don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, that is a great problem to have. I don't know necessarily, like, I mean, certainly people use the easy apply function in LinkedIn. It just makes everybody's life a little bit more easy, but we have not seen this complete scatter effect where people are just sending out mass resumes and they really have no idea what they had applied for. In the past, we really prided ourselves on reviewing every single application, but that's just no longer a realistic approach. Really pivot and explore how we could leverage the tools that were within our own ATS to screen more effectively. So we do use application questions that are very targeted at time of application. It's not a heavy lift. There's just a few of them, but I think that really helps to remove some of those folks that just full on aren't qualified for the role. We've also started utilizing the auto grading functionality within the questions that we do ask that are very targeted, and they aren't just a yes/no response. And then we can put weighting to each of those questions, and that sort of, will score or sort of rank the candidates based on how closely aligned they are to the position. And so another thing that's probably been really a huge win for us within our own ATS that we're using is there is a talent match functionality. So basically utilizing AI, using their algorithm to help us to determine if the qualifications and the skills that are most aligned with the role. It doesn't make the decision for us, but it does help us to sort and prioritize. And so it can take a look at our job description and others using its AI functionality, and then taking their experience, their resume, and seeing how closely aligned it is. And that tool's been a massive game changer. I think we've probably saved upwards of 50% in terms of how much more quickly we're able to screen. So it's been a game changer, and that was our number one pain point this year. So it was just really timely that they were able to provide something to us that was a real effective tool.
What does that look like on an actual day-to-day basis? So say like normal role, how many applicants would you get, say average-wise?
For something like an accounting role, we could see upwards of, 1,000 applicants in a few days. A lot of our customer support type roles, and certainly our sales roles, especially the more senior they get, there's just huge uptick, especially across North America. So you could have a sales leadership role that could have, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 candidates.
So let's say 1,000
Yeah.
applicants come in, and then they're running through the screener questions, then the talent matching. Like, what's the end number that you're working with? Does it bring it to 1,000 to 50 or 1,000 to 500? Like, how do you balance that?
We know if we look at the numbers that, it really does vary depending on the position that we're looking at, the amount of people that are actually qualified for the role. For some of our technical roles, we're focusing on like an engineering type position, maybe 5% are qualified. And we're seeing probably about 30% for non-technical roles. But, with using this functionality, we're saving time screening applicants. Instead, we can, go right out there and directly source, where we see more of a 40% response rate from qualified candidates through direct sourcing.
Was there any hesitancy internally of leveraging AI? You mentioned that it doesn't make a hiring decision, but it does help you, right? Was there any hesitancy within your organization? Hey, like this AI might cause us issues. There might be regulatory challenges in the future. Was that brought up? What was your process internally and make sure that, okay, we're good with this?
We were highly encouraged to look at what tools were available to us. I think we're avid early adopters of leveraging whatever tool we could. And, at the very least, it's really helped us to streamline our process by limiting some of those heavy administrative tasks, like drafting, communications and templates, that sort of thing, writing job postings, job descriptions, text messaging, kind of eliminating those repetitive things, even scheduling automation. So those were quick wins. We did want to remain mindful of the fact that, when you're using this AI or this algorithm, it's that it is not making the decision for us. And that's something we're very cognizant of and work with our legal team on. We just want to ensure that it's helping us, again, better evaluate and rank organized based on job titles and experience. Again, being very mindful of any possible subjectivity or bias in the screening process, but also knowing that it is not making an automated decision. It's not processing it for us. So that's something that's very important that we're mindful of that. And especially out of Europe, GDRP doesn't allow for that automatic decision making of personal data. So yeah, it is definitely something that's been top of mind for us.
Yeah, I love that approach. I'm a big fan of leveraging tools, automation to get to a point where we're improving the candidate experience. Because unfortunately, with the onslaught of resumes coming in and applying for jobs, it creates a challenge for talent acquisition departments that have, I would say, shrunk in the last couple of years. There's definitely less people in talent acquisition, there's less recruiters. And because of that, the whole experience is a lot of candidates are getting ghosted, which just creates a really bad experience. We're ghosting candidates are ghosting us.
Yes.
And it goes like full circle. Everyone's getting a negative experience. It's noisy out there. So I am a big supporter of what automation and AI can bring to the game, but I'm also very cognizant of that just human touch, right? Like I still think as humans, we want to deal with people, and getting a job is a big life event, right? We want to make sure that we're not downplaying that. So what's your thoughts around leveraging those tools, but also making sure that we're keeping the human connection in the recruitment process?
Yeah, I love that question, Serge. I think the foundation of successful recruitment will always be based on relationships. And that's what will keep recruiters relevant, even in the light of AI. We understand that interviewing is hard. It honestly sucks. It's stressful. Applying for jobs can be humbling. It can be exhausting. So putting the candidate experience first is always our objective. And even if the candidate isn't successful, we're mindful of how the experience left them feeling. Even this past year, we have implemented a unsuccessful candidate feedback survey to find out what was done well in our process. And you might say, well, hey, isn't everyone just sort of feeling a little bit sour because they weren't chosen to forward through the process? But what we found is some really good information about what was working well or not. Was the role clear? Were the responsibilities there? Was the company culture communicated clearly? The timelines, next steps, interview format, how many rounds do we really need? And most importantly, was the team partner prepared, and were they knowledgeable, and were they able to understand the role that they were recruiting to? And then that obviously extends through to the hiring team, the hiring manager. Is it a positive experience? Were they able to demonstrate confidence and strong leadership qualities and really create that meaningful candidate experience? So it's not entirely on the TA partner themselves. It moves right through to the hiring manager also.
Very good points. I'm curious. So I've had a couple of software TA leaders on the quality conversation, and both brought up situations where they were actually interviewing someone and they don't think the person they actually hired or showed up to work. And these are remote roles, right? Which Absorb is remote first. Have you had that situation that you're like, you interviewed someone, but who showed up to work, or something off in the interview, especially when it comes to software devs?
Yeah, we've heard those stories. From our experience, not really. I think, and that's based on the countries that we hire into.
Yeah.
Our TA partners do conduct that initial phone screen. Some of them prefer to do video calls. And we ask those targeted specific questions. But I think it's important that we have the right, evaluative processes in place. So when we move into those subsequent technical assessments, like technical testing, we started using CoderPad. We looked at HackerRank, but basically those tools too. And they're continually iterating, trying to determine if people are trying to beat the system or using AI to try and help them through those, testing exercises when they're coding or whatever the case may be. Take a look at the IP address where they're coming in through. And even through to, through our process, if they have to do a demonstration, if they have to do a pitch presentation, we're trying to see if they are, representing themselves, and do they have the job knowledge to do the position. We have had situations on some screens where there's lags or delays in their responses, and maybe they're trying to leverage something else to support them with their responses, but there honestly hasn't been that much of that, fortunately.
What a crazy world we live in that this is even a consideration, something we have to worry about. And I think it's going to get worse. I think we're just at the beginning of it. There's a couple of things that I want to just ask you before we go. So you're doing remote focus roles in a world where hybrid or full return to the office seems to be the norm, or at least where the trend is going. Must be a huge competitive advantage for you, right?
Yeah, it has been. As a remote first company, we do have the benefit of attracting talent across all of the major markets that we're
Yeah.
recruiting into. So the UK, Europe, Canada, the US, and then the APAC region, specifically Australia. I think it's been a tremendous advantage for us, but also a lot of work, to ensure we're compliant in all those jurisdictions. And I think our team does a really good job of that. We know that, outside existing tech talent hubs, that there is amazing talent everywhere, and it's our job to go out and find it. So yes, it has helped us to be very attractive to candidates. But on the flip side of that, Serge, we as an employer, we have to figure out how to manage the realities of remote work from an employee experience, and, ensure that we're really providing that positive onboarding process and training, and providing the team integration so that folks feel like they're part of something larger, because remote work can be isolating. People can feel siloed. And so there's a lot of upside to it, but it goes beyond just getting the job. But it is funny, in phone screens, I'll sometimes ask people, what attracted you to the position? What made you decide to apply? And I'm amazed at how many people will say, well, it was remote. I'd ideally like to hear a little bit more than that.
I know. Well, and that's good advice for any job seekers that is listening, is like, sure, it can be to have remote work, but the flip side to it is like, you still have to showcase why you want to work there. So come up with something a little bit better. So we talked about how much the landscape is changing and talent acquisition from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, to what it is now. It's changed. Some things have stayed the same, but we are living in a very fast-paced environment that AI is a big driver of it. And I think AI is going to affect talent acquisition. But looking at we're 2025. Let's look at 2030. What does your crystal ball say? What will hiring and talent acquisition look like?
That is a really fantastic question, Serge. I think it really depends on the industry and where people are
Yeah.
located. Globally, the next 5 years is going to be really interesting, and especially from the lens of AI, and talent acquisition teams that adopt that, embrace what AI can do, automation can do. They're going to be better prepared to weather what's next. And despite the ups and downs of recruitment, and I think it's a phenomenal time to be in TA. The ability to leverage tools that make our work more efficient and cut down on those administrative tasks that drive us crazy. Focusing on building our employer brand will be really critical more than ever, as people really do want to connect with brands that resonate with them and they feel strongly about the product. We'll try to create that hyper-personalized candidate experience more so than ever. And Absorb, one tool that we've just rolled out recently, is an HR use case of the LMS. It's called the Candidate Launchpad. So it's a portal for candidates to access prior to their interview so that they can know more about who we are and what we do and what our product is, and just have that level, that baseline foundation of information. And that'll save a lot of time for recruiters to be able to really drill down on their skills and experience versus the time spent talking about, the company, because not everybody researches and is prepared. But I think on a go forward, we're going to see even more emphasis on skills-based hiring. In certain fields where it's warranted. There are always going to be areas where, you need the education, the qualifications, the certifications to do the work. But we're also looking at new opportunities that maybe they don't need that formal education. So skills-based matching will be on the rise, as well as looking at internal mobility and job matching internally. So yeah, I think the challenges are going to continue to be there, though, especially for those niche roles, those technical roles, AI, machine learning, product managers, some of our specialized marketing roles, marketing analytics, demand generation, things like that, and those highly technical customer support roles. They're always going to be challenging to fill.
And if I look at 2030, I think a lot is going to change. I think you're definitely in the right direction. I think we're going to see bots interviewing bots at one particular point. I have some rapid fire questions for you if you're ready.
Yeah, okay, let's do it.
All right, tell me about a book that has changed your perspective on business or HR or anything.
Yeah, I think one that it's an oldie but a goodie. It's called Top Grading. It's by Brad and Jeff Smart. It's a classic. And I think that's really helps to focus on the internal strength that we have, our bench strength, and really highlight that top talent internally before, moving to recruiting externally. I started reading The Brain Friendly Workplace by Frederic Farbuchevs.
Okay.
And it's really focused on the flexibility and the diversity in workplaces. That's helping to, employees to really get their peak performance.
Love it. Are you a podcast person or more Netflix
Well,
series type?
bit of both. Yeah, I do have a few streaming services, that's for sure. But I do listen to some podcasts. I like Purple Acorn. Some great content there, for sure. Some great HR insights. I've always liked Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett.
Oh, I love Diary of a CEO.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
Lots of great influential experts and thinkers. So I like that. I have started listening to Talent Acquisition Leaders with Ryan Dell.
Yes.
Lots of great insights into the future of HR. And in terms of influencers, I've recently started following Ali K. Miller. She's, obviously very big on open machine learning and AI. And she spoke most recently at the LinkedIn Tech conference that just happened this past year. And I think she's just got some phenomenal ideas on where AI is going to be moving in the future of HR.
Yeah, she's fantastic. That's a good call out. What do you watch for fun? What's your streaming service or Netflix show that you're like, I just want to chill?
Yeah. Well, my all-time favorite show is Ted Lasso.
Okay. I love Ted Lasso.
White Lotus is coming back, so I'm excited to watch the next season.
My wife just was mentioning she has watched it and I haven't. She's like, you'll love it. So I have to get on White Lotus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if anyone is looking to get a hold of you, to talk, what's the best way to connect with you?
Probably LinkedIn. It's my home away from home. We spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, don't we, Serge?
To recruiters, you have to, even though some days I'm like, oh, this is so cringy sometimes, LinkedIn, but I guess that's what we love so much about it. Last piece of advice for any talent acquisition leaders, practitioners, what advice would you give to them?
I think I'd probably target this to leaders of organizations. I would really encourage them to fully back and support your talent acquisition teams. I think providing the funding for the tech and the tools to help them do their job well, not understaffing TA teams is so critical. And yes, recruitment volume will always fluctuate. The rec level will come and go due to so many external factors, but a highly functional TA team is critical for making sure that the employer brand stays really strong and that talent pipeline is healthy, and that with the focus of quality, our conversation today, that we can find that quality of candidate, and that can, again, stay top priority. It's not just a nice to have. And we don't want recruitment to ever feel like a bottleneck. It's really a partnership with the business. And I think that's why the partnership model is so critical to the success of the hire.
I love that advice. And too many times recruiters are the canary in the coal mine when the economy goes down and up. And when you do need to ramp up, if you've laid off your team or you've moved people, you can't ramp up as quickly. That just creates that situation that the candidates are not getting a good experience and your hiring managers are not, because you're running, trying to fill these roles, but you're not planned, you're not ready. So I love that. There is plenty of projects. There's plenty of things you can do when recruitment slows down, because it will restart again. And we've seen that over and over, being in talent acquisition for a long time. And I really love this conversation. Some fantastic insights. And this is our world, right? Talent acquisition. So anything we can do to make it better. And I think you gave some really good perspective of what you do. And again, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, Serge. I love this. I could talk all day. We're going to have to do it again.
We could, but we'll do episode 2 at one particular point. I love it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.